Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Kalanati. As soon as I start my intro on Sunday mornings, the dog starts eating. Or doing something. It never fails. Today I'm going to wrap up the last 5 books that I read for the AtoZReadathon in November. I did successfully complete the challenge. I read 1 book for every letter of the alphabet in 30 days. And I really enjoyed this last batch of books that I read, despite how intensely I had to read in order to finish them on time. The first one is Miranda in Milan by Katharine Duckett. This is a Tor.com novella and it's an arc. It's not coming out until March of 2019. So I'll probably talk about this a little bit more closer to the actual publication date. But I really enjoyed it. This is kind of a continuation of the story of Shakespeare's The Tempest, but from the point of view of Miranda, who is Prospero's daughter. This is when she is returned with her father to Milan. He is returned to power over his brother, who is said to have kind of usurped his role. I don't remember the story of The Tempest that well. But Milan is not what was promised, and Miranda is kind of a prisoner in her own home. People are not allowed to see her face, and she begins to suspect that her father is not what she thought he was, and that maybe his love for her was deeply poisoned in some way. And you know, what happened to her mother. And it was a lot darker and got a bit creepier near the end than I expected. It's definitely got a real fantasy twist to it. And I really enjoyed it. You could kind of call it a queering of Shakespeare. Miranda does have a lady love interest in it. And I thought that it was suitably kind of dark and creepy, but also sweet in some places. And it was a much better ending for Miranda, I think, than in the play. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It really made me want to go back and read The Tempest, because I keep reading books that allude to it and I don't remember it so well, though I remember loving the language in it. And I would also like to point out that I think Duckett has a lovely style. This is the second thing I've read by her, and I just think she has a real way with words, and just her storytelling is beautiful. So this one I definitely recommend, and it does have a wonderful cover design. The cover of this is cover art and design by David Wardle, and it is extremely eye-catching. Next up, I listened to Very Good Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse on audiobook. This was a last-minute addition to my TBR because I was originally going to read Viper Wine by Hermione Eyre for the letter V. I started that book and I still plan on finishing it, but I decided I didn't want to rush through it. I needed to take my time with it so that I could enjoy it. So I noticed that there were more Wodehouse audiobooks available on Overdrive now, and this is how I really like to enjoy the Jeeves and Wooster stories and other things by Wodehouse. So I listened to this collection. It was a lot of fun, and it was pretty fresh and interesting because I hadn't really listened to or watched any of the stories, the Jeeves and Wooster stories in particular, in years. So it was really good. I don't necessarily always love these stories. They are definitely repetitive. There's a formula, but they are really entertaining all the same. So yeah, it was just very amusing. Next up is Ilium by Dan Simmons. I feel like I could sit down and spend an entire video in like 30 minutes talking about this book and just trying to describe what is in it. This was an incredible and exciting mashup of far future science fiction with the Trojan War and like Shakespeare. There are a ton of literary references in this. So I think I'll try to describe the 3 major storylines. This primarily takes place like a couple of thousand years in the future. There are very few humans remaining on Earth. There are also post-humans, which have essentially abandoned Earth and now seem to be mostly living on Mars, which they have terraformed. There are also these kind of, I'm going to call them like androids, but they're specially designed robotic beings called Moraveks, who like live on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn and stuff, and in the asteroid belt. I believe they were designed by humans, but they kind of have their own society and they're autonomous now. So one storyline takes place on Earth when 3 people, Ada, Harmon, and Damon, meet with a woman who is called the Wandering Jew. She is actually very old. She predates this thing called the Final Facts, which was when most of humanity went somewhere else. And she has stayed alive over a couple of thousand years, mainly by being in cryosleep. And she understands how the world works in a way that the contemporary humans don't. So this group of 3 humans are trying to find out more about how their world works, and they want to, well, let's say one of them wants to live longer than 100 years, which is the longest they are allowed to live. Then there is Hockenberry. Hockenberry is a like resurrected consciousness of a classics academic from the 20th century of Earth. Basically, the post-humans on Mars are using their quantum technology to go back in time and observe the Trojan War as it's happening, and they are the Greek gods and goddesses who are interfering and directing the war. And they have brought back academics who specialized in the Trojan War and the Iliad to be their scholics, to be their observers, to tell the post-humans if the Trojan War is actually proceeding in the way that it was described in the Iliad. So Hockenberry is the point of view character for that storyline, where he's been brought back, he spent close to a decade observing the war, and can he avoid dying, because they eventually kill the scholics when they start to recover their own memories and personalities more. And then Aphrodite approaches Hockenberry and says, "So, I want you to help me kill Athena." And he's like, "Oh no, this is bad." And then the third storyline is told from the point of view of a Moravek from Europa, I believe, who joins up with some other Moraveks who have this mission to go to Mars to determine exactly what is going on with the post-humans. They've determined that the post-humans are using quantum technology in a very dangerous way, and they think they will probably have to eliminate this threat to the broader solar system. But like, what is going on Mars? And eventually all of these storylines start to collide, and you see like more of what's actually happening. So this was a crazy good mashup of futuristic sci-fi, quantum technology, stuff that just seems like magic at this point, fascinating ideas, and then all these allusions to the Iliad, to Shakespeare's sonnets and plays. His sonnets are a specialty of the main Moravek character, who's obsessed with them. The Tempest and Prospero and Caliban are referenced and are very important near the end of the story. Another Moravek, his specialty is Proust. And there are a lot of discussions about these literary works and how they are at all applicable to the situations that the characters find themselves in. And it was fascinating. So I don't completely understand everything that's going on in this yet. There are some answers by the end of the story, but clearly there is more to come, because there is a sequel called Olympos, and I assume that will be the grand finale of, you know, what is really going on here. But honestly, the one thing that I started to get really tired of reading about was Hockenberry. I mean, it was so predictable. He's in the middle of the Trojan War. He can assume the shape and form of any Trojan or person that he wants to for limited amounts of time. He's gonna find Helen of Troy and try to sleep with her. I didn't really care for him. And you know, occasionally I get this idea that I should like read the Iliad and the Aeneid and things like that, but after reading all the passages about the Trojan War where a lot of that stuff is just info dumped, I think I might actually be bored reading the Iliad and the lists of names and everything that people have. I don't know, it might be worth it, but for now I think I'll just read the sequel to this and then make up my mind about whether it's worth reading any of the literature that's referenced. And lastly, I finished off the readathon with 2 translated Japanese science fiction novels, both of which feature really epic scale engineering projects, which were fascinating, but I enjoyed one of them more than the other. I like both of them, but there were some real differences, especially in character development. So I'll start off with The Next Continent by Issui Ogawa, which is translated into English by Jim Hubbert. This is the one where I loved the main plot, I loved the construction and engineering in it, and the explanations of how they solve so many problems. But the characters were just really not done well, especially near the end. So the core of this book is that the granddaughter of a Japanese billionaire who has serious daddy issues decides that she wants to build a wedding palace on the moon. For most of the book, she can never really articulate why she wants to do this, and nobody who's working on the project really understands why either. It's like a lot of people just saying, okay, we have this challenge, we're an engineering firm, we do this sort of thing for a living, give us the money, give us the resources, we have this amount of time, and here are the phases of our project, let's go do it. And I really enjoy reading that type of thing. It's actually quite inspiring to read about people just getting down to work and getting stuff done and hitting the deadlines and overcoming the problems, and you know, I like that. But the fact is that why most of this is happening just isn't really coalesced. It's not really put into words well. And there's kind of this ongoing relationship between a man who's working on the project and the woman who is running it, basically. And they kind of have this almost, like they're almost in a romantic relationship, and he's one of the few people who can really kind of dig and needle her about, like, tell us why you want to do this. What is the problem that you are trying to fix by taking on this almost impossible task of building a wedding palace on the moon? What is the point of that? And it never really is explained well. And for that reason, there's this missed opportunity between like the culmination, the achievement of the actual project, and then the emotional fulfillment there. There should be the sort of coinciding between, you know, we're getting the work done and now we understand why we did it, but it never really happens. So I could really enjoy the science and technology and engineering aspects. The character stuff, the character development just wasn't really good. But the other book, which is The Ouroboros Wave by Jyouji Hayashi, it's really hard to read, it's at an angle. This is also translated by Jim Hubbert. This is the one that I enjoyed way more. Essentially, this begins when humans discover that there is a nearby small black hole, which we dub Kali, and it is on a collision course with the sun. Eventually, it will collide with the sun over hundreds or maybe thousands of years. So a project is launched to change the orbit of the black hole and kind of put it in orbit around Uranus, and to engineer a man-made accretion disk around the black hole to harness energy from it and basically provide unlimited energy for the entire solar system. And this isn't exactly a novel, it's more like a collection of 5 or 6 stories over time as the project continues, as the accretion disk is built, and as this project basically becomes its own political entity and really upsets the political balance and, you know, the powers in the solar system. And just how people work on it, how people interact with it, how it just changes life in the solar system. All of the stories are very science fictional, very much we have a mystery we need to solve, or we have a problem we need to solve. The first one is about an artificial intelligence that kills someone, and they're trying to figure out why. The AI has not gone rogue, it's simply been programmed wrong, and they have to figure out how it was misprogrammed in order to keep it from killing more people. And it was like a detective story just on a gigantic accretion disk around a black hole and in space. So stories like that. I really thought that a bunch of the characters were done well. The stories build on each other, so characters do reappear and events are referenced multiple times. I also noticed that in contrast to The Next Continent, which really only has 2 female characters, both of whom are not done super well, almost every single story in this book, in the Ouroboros Wave, has a female protagonist or multiple female characters in the background. So I think there's actually a very even split between men and women in the stories, and it like passes the Bechdel test and everything. It was just really good. I get the feeling that this is like the first collection in a much longer series of stories which hasn't ended yet. I would love to know if there have been more stories published in this universe continuing on the story of the project with the black hole and everything. So I would love to know where it goes. So I thought these were such good stories. I don't think if any more exist that they've been translated into English, but I can only hope that eventually they will be. So this is the one that I would really highly recommend, especially if you like hard science fiction, but you want hard science fiction or translated science fiction that actually does characterization pretty well. So yeah, definitely recommend this one. And that was a really good, you know, end note for the A to Z readathon for me. I really enjoyed doing it. I'm glad that I read some translated work for it. I think I am managing to hit my 10% goal for the year in its entirety, but I still have to do some number crunching. But I think that's enough rambling from me for this weekend. I have really slowed down my reading in December. I think I've only finished 2 things so far in the first week, which is really slow for me. I'll probably try to do another wrap up, like batch of mini reviews before I leave for Christmas vacation. That'll probably be my last video of the year whenever that happens, because I am going to Colorado for Christmas. I haven't traveled for Christmas in a really long time, and this year I get to spend it with a side of my family that I haven't seen in many years. Close to 20 years at this point, I think. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm really excited to be going to Colorado again, because it has also been many years since I spent any time in Colorado, and I have good memories of that from when I was a kid. So yeah, that is it from me this weekend. I hope you are having a good weekend. I will talk to you again later, and until then, bye.